Alrighty. Hello, everybody watching. Gareth here with AutoCrit, and welcome to this very special interview with author and filmmaker Erica Summers, brought to you
Hello.
by AutoCrit's extensive horror writing course, Nightmare Fuel. Just as a quick intro from me, Erica is an AutoCrit member and alumni of Nightmare Fuel. Since taking the course, has seen some fantastic success with selling stories all over the place. So after I heard about that, I thought, well, let's get talking to Erica and get some insight about that process, for everybody here in the community to benefit from. So, Erica, big welcome. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And really, to get started with any interview, that I do, I like to get a bit of background. So, can you give us some background on yourself as a writer? What got you started there? Why horror? You've plenty of horror stuff in the background, so I assume you're a big horror fan. It's kind of why,
Huge.
why that direction?
So it started very, very young for me. I would say definitely too young in my opinion as an adult now, but at the time it just seemed right. So, my mother and father are both huge fans of horror movies and horror novels. My mom more novels, but my both of my parents just loved horror movies. So I remember from a very young age having my first like Freddy nightmares and stuff at like 3 years old, where I was like, Freddy's gonna turn me into a puppet, and things that like normal 3 year olds don't really think about. Like, I was watching people get eviscerated at a very young age. So to me, like, finding out about it started with movies first. So finding out about like the movie magic with Jaws, particularly, where I just started bawling, and then my parents had to like stop the movie and assure me that nobody died while making it, and then show me movies that Richard Dreyfuss made after Jaws to prove that he was alive, because I still didn't believe them. And then my mom pulls out all of her Fangorias and she shows me the behind the scenes stills where people are in the shark. And to me, it just blew my mind. And I was like, oh my God, you can make someone feel this way with something fake.
It's like this is
And
uh, this is magic.
yeah, it really is. It's the closest thing to like real life magic I've ever seen in my life. So I immediately knew that I wanted to do something involving that. And from a young age, I definitely didn't have like a camera or the money or the ability to make movies. So I wrote in school all the time. Like, I constantly, the only thing I ever got in trouble for in school in all my years was like writing stories during class. And my teachers would be like, what are you doing? So I would show them, then they would read it and it would be far worse than they originally thought, because I'm eviscerating classmates and things in my stories. So they're like, we might need to get you some therapy or something, because this girl is like a ticking time bomb. And my parents assured her, they were like, look, we have a library of horror novels, we watch horror movies, we've explained to her like she's a really good person. She's, kind of, she's not the kind of person that's just gonna, shoot up a school or something. She's, getting it all out in the writing and stuff. So my parents were basically like, I don't, I appreciate what you're saying, but she's not a mass murderer.
Yeah.
And they encouraged it at home. So then, right around 16, I decided I wanted to be an actress, which was a terrible idea in retrospect, because I couldn't get into any plays. I couldn't get into any like local theater stuff. And like my mother and my sister were all like, they'd ace all these auditions, no problem. And people were just like, I can't even give you a part out of pity. Like, I just can't. And I was like, I'm going to show them, I'm going to make my own movie and I'm going to be the star and I'm going to show them that I'm going to take Hollywood by storm one of these days. So I forcefully made all of my friends and siblings take part in this movie called The Stalker, where I was the stalker, and to try to show off my like acting prowess. And so I borrowed my dad's handy cam, and we were running all around the town filming this stupid movie that it's only available. I have one copy on VHS and nothing else, nothing digitized, nothing. And so when it came out, I realized, like, I premiered it for my family and I showed them. I was like, this is what we've all been working on. They're like, okay, two things. One, I don't think you should be an actress. I really think you need to abandon this idea. However, as a filmmaker, you've got something here. So as soon as I kind of stepped out from in front of the camera and behind the camera, I realized like, wow, I really do have something here. And I tried a couple of different genres, but I always kept coming back to horror. I was like, horror is just all I love. Like I love when I read a book, it's horror. When I watch a movie, it's 90% of the time horror and 10% of the time stupid comedy, like brainless Step Brothers style stupid comedy. I either don't want to think or I want to be scared. And for me, like just all of that, I feel like the books and the movies they pair so well because with my movies I have to write the script for the movie, so
Yeah,
I'm always coming up with stories, and they're almost always horror stories. So making the transition literally back into book has been really interesting for me because it kind of happened out of necessity through the pandemic
sure,
because
yeah.
I filmed the movie. It was like my sixth feature called Obsidian. It's out on like a lot of the streaming services. And I'd worked so hard on this movie for years, and it hit the festival circuit right as the pandemic hit. And I was thinking that the pandemic was going to be short lived and like this was just going to be like a blip on the
Yeah, I
radar.
think we all did.
And
It's like it'll be 2 months, don't worry
yeah,
about
and
it.
I was thinking, some of these festivals aren't for a year from now, so I'm just gonna enter them. And we got in a ton of festivals, and they all shut down or they all went online and nobody watched the film. And like we won a bunch of awards, but nobody cared because nobody was there, nobody saw it, there was no award ceremony. It was just people emailing me certificates being like, good job on this movie. And it's like,
Ugh,
as a
um,
as a glory hound like I am, like I am definitely hungry for the glory. Like I'm not a humble, I mean I'm a humble person in my abilities, but if there's an award on the line, I want it and I will like try to get it. And so when people are just like emailing me, they're just like, good job. I was just like, this sucks. Like we worked so hard on this, and reshoots were terrible because at one scene we tried to reshoot 7 different times. We kept having COVID outbreaks the day before or the day of and not meeting at all. And like people couldn't fly back to Louisiana to try to reshoot it. So I was like, this is a pain right now. I can't even do this. And the pandemic lasted. It's still, kind of a thing, but I was like, I'm not making another movie while this is happening. I'm not having a COVID team. I'm not having reschedule. It's hard enough to make a movie as it is. So I was like, what I've enjoyed in the past is, writing without a budget and without limitations and without, pandemic restrictions and stuff. And that's, like writing novels and short stories. So I went back to that during the pandemic, and it actually started because I saw an ad on my Facebook for Nightmare Fuel. And so I clicked the video and I'm like watching the trailer for it. And I was like, this actually sounds really fun. Like, this sounds like it would be a really good class. The price is right. And I'm Jewish, and I feel like that's saying something. not to be not to be super racist, but I'm not I don't just spend money willy-nilly. So I saw it, and I've always loved like writing courses and stuff like that. I feel like it jogs something in me where like it
yeah.
just sort of inspires me, and like it's like back to basics, and it makes me think about things from a whole new way. So, and I always think it's good. It's like a humbling experience. Like, as much as you think you don't know crap until you go back and relearn because there's always something more to pick up. Like, I feel like I'll always take classes. I could be Stephen King and still taking writing classes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fairly universal. So there's always
Yeah, yeah.
even
It's
just things that you left behind. It's like, oh
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Or yeah, completely forgot about. There's so many things that so I took the course obviously with you, and it was amazing. Like it was much more than I thought it was going to be because the the readings were really interesting. Like I thought that would be really boring, but like some of like Rain Hall's stories really resonated with me. I was like, oh, I was like inspired. I was getting chills from some of that stuff. And I was like, this is just such a simple story, but it really evokes an emotion. And
Yeah,
there's
I
like so
think
many,
a lot of her stuff is very subtle in that
yeah,
way. You don't
yeah.
really notice it until it creeps up on you.
Oh, there was some really good ones. One about the fire really got me. The fire in the small town, and I was just like, oh my god, I want to write something like this. And there's a lot of those really cool prompts throughout the readings where it's like, hey, what if you wrote, something like this, or what if, uh, talking about phobias, pick a phobia and write a couple of paragraphs about it, and like I force myself to do this because, like, I think it's real easy for people who've been writing for a while to just be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And just be like, I got it. I got it. Thank you for the reading. And I was like, no, I paid for the class. I'm going to do the class. And I did those prompts. And I'm so glad that I did because some of those I was like, dang, that could be a whole story right there. Like, I'm really proud of myself. And it gives you these little boosts, these little, like, you can do it boosts. And then like the actual video of course was amazing. Like, you gave us so many really good references for other books. Like, while you were talking about stuff, I had like a list of books that I've since read that are awesome. Like, thank you for the recommendations, by
You're
the way.
welcome. I'm glad to hear it's
And
useful. I always
oh,
get scared
so
when it's like,
good.
what did you think of things? It's like,
I'm I'm actually reading The Girl Next Door right now, and I'm so excited because that's the one I remember you talking about that one a bunch in class, and I think that was the last one on my list. But I've been trying to save it because I know it's gonna be good.
just gotta steel yourself for that one. Build up
Yeah,
to it.
yeah. Gotta pace myself. But I think the video part of the course was really interesting because you allowed us to ask questions, and like I had notes and questions every single time we logged on there. And then you gave us some writing prompts. Like, I remember there was one where you had us just talk about like the woman running through the house, and you were just like, here's an example of this, but how can you invoke certain emotions and stuff like that. And I remember we were doing that like live and sending you our little paragraphs, and it was like exciting at the same time because I was like, everybody's about to read my stuff right now. And it was like the positive reactions and the support that we all gave to each other was really rewarding because I was like, wow, we're all really trying to do this, and we're all doing it. We're all technically writing right now, which is what a lot of wannabe writers say that they always talk about it, but they're not doing it. Like, even though it's a paragraph, we're doing it. So
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. That also harkens back to what you said about some of the exercises that are recommended in there. It's easy if you
yeah,
think I'm too experienced to bother with this.
yeah,
You're not going to get the benefit. But then there's also the people who are not quite experienced, kind of get to it and go, "Oh, I'll do it later," or I can't really be
yeah.
bothered. The key is in doing it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
gotta.
Don't procrastinate it. Honestly, like, you want to. Your first instinct is to procrastinate it or to blow it off and to be like, okay, I get the idea. But honestly, I feel like that's where the growth lies. It's you're getting the tools, but you have to actually practice using them in those moments. And that's really what sticks with you after the class ends, because you always have access to the course materials, which I've referenced a bunch of times. There's particularly a chapter on doors that I keep going back to, and I'm always like, I always forget about the doors. I gotta add some doors in here, or add a door. And so there's a lot of stuff that's really great to go back to, but it's that stuff in the moment that really, I think, makes some like made me a better writer. And there's also the community chat forum thing. I can never remember what it's actually called, but it's like a
Yeah,
like
community. That'll
yeah,
do.
the community. And there's like I saw a listing for, it was calls for submissions. I was like, wow, this place really has everything. It's got this software, which the software, we'll get into that in a second. The software, the AutoCrit software, best money I've ever spent in my life, other than maybe the course itself, because that has that has changed not only my past writing, but how I write now, because I feel like it's teaching me in real time. I'm like, there's where I'm going wrong. There, I keep doing it. Um, But so you got access to the software, you got access to the course materials, you got access to the video class, and then you've got this online community where like I saw this post for submissions or a call for submissions for snafu. And I was like, this sounds exciting. And I was like, I'm already taking the course, but what if I had a project where I could be applying this stuff on the side?
Yeah,
And
perfect.
so I loved it. I was doing it in tandem, like I was doing them together. And I thought it was really exciting that you guys were even like posting that kind of stuff because I was like, see, there's actual opportunities for paid gigs for writers. Like I didn't realize that up until that point because I didn't like I just thought, you write a novel and then you either don't, do well or you are Stephen King one day, like you just don't like there's not a lot of like working author stuff in between. And like that's another thing that I got from your video course was hearing you talk about like ghost writing and other projects that paid projects that you're working on. And it was like really fascinating because I was like, wow, there's actually like a market for writers as a profession, like
Yeah.
as a paying a paying source of income. And so I wasn't really in it so much for the money. I was just I'm like a woman who sits around a campfire and like tries to scare all the kids with stories all night. That's like if that could be a career, that would be my ideal career is to just scare the crap out of people
Just
around a campfire.
the camp traumatizer.
Yeah, the swamp witch. I just want to be, Blackwater Hattie and like live in the swamp and just freak people out. And like that's my goal in life. So the interesting thing was you guys posted the calls for submission. And so I was writing that in the meantime, and like I submitted that, and I get this huge rush of adrenaline when I completed this project, and I felt so good about how it came out because I ran it through the software, and like it went from a C minus to like an A minus just the first try, and then I kept reworking and kept reworking it until I felt like A plus material. And like so I submitted that and then I was like, what else is out there? So I started like just finding out what else is out there. I found Horror Tree and I found, found all these little sites online, and I was like, there's a lot of stuff like calling for short
Yeah,
stories.
yeah.
And you read the little prompts, and I was like, I love this idea. I'm gonna write a story for this. And I got my sister involved too. And I got her hooked on the software too. She's like, she loves it. And so we were both like submitting for different calls and stuff like that. So the course ends. Unfortunately, I didn't get the snafu story. They actually wrote me back and they said, like, normally we send like a form letter, but in this case, we wanted to let you know we had like a table of contents of 12 and you were 13. Like
Ah,
it was between you and one other, which I was like, I took that as a huge, it's a bummer, but it's a huge compliment that you're like, wow, I was that close. They were like, we had hundreds of submissions. So I was like, wow, that's saying something because I've never like won anything in my life. And I never like, I'm not like, I've never just had like a natural ability where people like read my stuff and they're like, oh my God, this blew my mind. They're usually like, that's good, keep working at it. So to hear that I beat out so many people for, almost this slot on the table of contents. I was like, I feel like I'm getting the tools now. If I could just keep practicing this, eventually I'm gonna get there. And I wrote a couple more short stories. I just kept sending them out to places. And it takes a long time
oh
to
yeah.
you don't realize that. You don't sometimes you forget you even wrote it. And then like 9 months later, someone's like, yeah, we want it. And you're like, you want what? Like, oh my God, that story I wrote like a year ago. So it started breaking open for me, I would say about 6 months. It was only like 6 months after the class where I started getting like contracts in my email where they were like, we want your story. And then I'd get another one like a month later where they're like, we want your story. Or, I get a lot of it was between you and one other person out of like 400 entries. And I was like, dang, that's on the right path though.
Yes,
Like that's
I'll take it.
yeah, that's exciting because that's something where, and I was always like, this isn't a waste of time, because absolute worst case scenario is I end up with a bunch of short stories that are unpublished. I can turn them into my own anthology and publish it as an anthology. Like, you don't, it's not a waste if you believe in what you're doing. There's always some sort of avenue where that can be still fruitful effort. So that's something, like, for people out there who are just starting, like, definitely keep that in mind. It's like, it's not a waste. It's all practice. Sometimes you may have to go back through and rework a story that you initially thought was really good. Like, there was a couple where I was like, nailed it. I feel like this is, it's gonna be one and done on this one. I'm gonna send this into this one. Boom, they're gonna want it. And they send it back and they're like, no, we don't want it. And you're like, wow, that sucks. And you're like, what could they possibly not have wanted about it? And then you read it again now that 6 months has passed, and you're like, wow, I want to rework this because it's not as good
Not
as I
quite
remember.
landing as I thought it did.
Yeah, like, once you get a little time between you and the project, you're like, eh. And then there's somewhere, like, I finished just in the nick of time. It's like 11:30 the night the deadline's
Oh,
closed. I'm like emailing it at the last second. I'm like, haven't had a chance to look through it a second time. Hope this is good. And then, like, up 2 weeks later, they're like, we want it. Here's the contract. And you're like, what? Wow, that was awesome. So
looking at the places you've had stories placed so far, there's a number of great names in there. I'll
yeah,
just consult the list here as well because I think I listed it. Was it Dark Lake Publishing,
yep,
Eerie River,
yeah,
Hellbound Books, Black
yeah,
Hare Press? You've published on Godless as well, the Godless
yeah.
platform. How's it been working with all of them? Has it been pretty smooth in terms of acceptances and getting everything signed and just kind of out there?
Yeah, most of them for sure. Erie River, I would say, is the best. Like, I would 100, like, I write stuff just for their calls now, because I love the material that they put out. Like, I have almost their whole line of books now because I've fallen in love with their, like, complete library. And also, just the people that work there are so nice. They're always like Michelle and Holly. Every time I've had dealings with them, they are just the sweetest women that you've ever, they want the best, and they have the best intentions for writers and stuff like that. And I literally can't say enough nice things about them. Like, I would love to have a novel published with them one day, which, in fact, my newest novella is under consideration with them right now. They're actually in the process of reading it to see if it's something that they want to put out in their lineup. But
Superb.
even
Fingers crossed.
even if they don't, like, I'll continue to support them and try again until one day that I do have a novel with them, because they've been top notch. Dark Lake, not so much, only because it's been very hard to get answers from them a lot of times. Like, the that anthology was the first one I ever got published in, so I was like extremely excited. I was like, I want to send copies to my dad. I want to send copies to my
Yeah.
sister. I want to have copy, on my shelf. And, like, the physical book still hasn't come out yet, and the contract, like the 1 year contract for that story, is already up. So, like, it's been a while that it's only been available on ebook and only on Amazon. Like, they said it would be available to, like, Barnes and Noble and their website and stuff like that, and it's just on Amazon as an ebook right now. So every time I email them to be like, what's going on with that? Or, can I buy a copy for my, even just for my shelf? I just don't really get much of an answer. Like, I, the last three emails, I don't even think I've gotten an answer. So
Well, fingers
that
crossed
was cool.
it'll show up sooner rather than later,
Yeah.
I guess.
But the other ones, help, Hellbound Books or Bloodbound, but geez, oh my god, I
The
read a lot too.
Hellbound, yeah.
Yeah, I read a lot too, so that's the problem. Is, like, I know all of these publishers by their works, but, like, I confuse a lot of them. But they've been fantastic as well. So, and then I've got several that are still, like, up in the air right now for different publications. There's a video game anthology that is coming out that I'm still got my fingers
Is
crossed.
that No Lives Left?
Yes, No Lives Left. So that one I'm hoping for, but I am excited about the lineup already. And then there's another anthology that's about mother horror, which is a topic that's very near and dear to me because I don't have a relationship with my mother anymore because my life has been a horror story with her, for the last 15 or so years. So that one, to get in that one would be an honor just because of the subject matter, to be like, thank you. This has not all been for nothing.
Yeah, so
My
you let
trauma can be
you let
your
me
trauma.
exercise that demon.
Yeah. What's funny is my sister entered that one as well. So if we both got in, that would be a really big black mark on the source of the problem, but also just very therapeutic sometimes writing about stuff like that, where you're like, you know what, I don't have to actually catch a criminal case in real life. I could just do it on the page. It's fine, and
Sure.
then everybody's like, ooh, this is so good, and
And
you're like,
you were mentioning a minute ago the novella. So I know
yeah,
we spoke a little behind the scenes, and this novella, it was actually born from that
yeah,
snafu kind of number 13 on the
yeah,
list. Um,
exactly.
how did that work for you? You know, kind of taking that story, because I think there's a bit of a lesson there in terms of, you know, maybe if you've written a story and you've sent it out to a few places and it keeps getting rejected, like, is there some other way to repurpose it or do
Yeah,
something different?
yeah. And so that was my thought. So when I sent that one out, I think the word count that they wanted was 5,000 to 9,000 words. And since it was my first like submitted story, I went high with it. I was like, I'm just gonna write and write and write. And I had to whittle it down to like 9,000 something word. I think it was under 10,000 words. But it was like, it was close. It was close to the upper limit on that. And for me, I was just like, I wrote all this stuff, and I really think it all pertains. I think it's all important to the story. So when I didn't get in there, I started realizing that most short story submission calls are like 4 to 5,000 words.
Yeah.
So I was like double that. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? It's fine. I'm just gonna go back through and re-edit a shorter version. Keep the big version just in case, but re-edit it as like a 5,000 word version. That way I can submit it to all the other like calls, and I think I could get it down to like 6,500 without like just ripping out complete pieces of plot, and all of which I really wanted to keep because I was like attached to how the story like worked together.
Yeah.
And so there were a few where I started I left it right around like 7,000. It was like high 6,000, and there were a few calls that were like 4 to 5,000, and I would query the editor and be like, hey, I've got a story. Before I submit it, it's a little bit over, it's this word count, it's like almost 7,000 words. Is it still something that you'd consider? And almost always they say yes. So that's something that people should keep in mind, is if your story doesn't quite fit, you can always ask, because a lot of times they're like, yeah, I'd still like to read it. If it's worth it, it's worth the extra 2,000 words, and so I said that in a few times where they said, yeah, absolutely, we can consider it, even though it's like 7,000 words. And then with three of those, it was almost the same sort of email. It was like a cosmic joke where they're like, so we had a table of contents that allowed for 13 stories. Yours would have been 13 if this one hadn't beat you. Or, it was like, I was always the next one on the list, or where they were like, we considered changing it and just adding yours, but then it would be too costly to reproduce a book. So
Uh,
we had to cut yours. And I was like, oh, every time. And I was getting all these other contracts and publications. So it's exciting once you start. It's hard at first, but once you start getting the ball rolling and you have a lot of stories coming in and going out, and also Submission Grinder saves my life because that's the only way I could keep all this stuff straight. Because I think before I discovered Submission Grinder, I submitted to one call like with three different stories by accident over the course of a month. I just kept I have no memory, so I just kept discovering it again. I was like, oh, this would be perfect for my cosmic horror story. And then the next time I was like, oh, this would be perfect for my surf horror story. And like they like eventually wrote me back and they're like, we reject all of your stories that you had submitted to us. And I was like, what do you mean? And then I like looked through my email, I was like, oh my God, that's embarrassing. And so definitely use Submission Grinder if you're serious about writing, because it's free and it will help you keep everything. It's also a good way to check to keep yourself from panicking and emailing them if you don't see other people getting rejection or acceptance forms on the little graph, then they're still deciding. So
Yeah,
you
that's exactly what I use it for. It's like instead of like checking
yeah
your email every day, it's like just submission
yeah
grinder. Are there any rejections popping up on the chart? No,
exactly.
don't
Yeah,
worry
or
about
like
it.
you then you start to get excited when you see activity and then you're like, okay, all right, well, let's wait, let's keep an eye out for this email and stuff because so much of that stuff goes into the junk folder too. I'm always worried about deleting it by accident and get my contract just
That
deleted.
that is very true. Yeah.
But so that was that was a really good find for me. And so once you start getting like a lot of these stories out in the air, you start having a lot more success with like something is going to stick eventually if you just stay persistent, which is my I'm not as good of a writer as I am just a persistent person. I will just not stop. I will just keep banging my head against the wall until I get results. I'm just very tough like that. Like I framed my first rejection letter. I wrote an erotica novel when I was like 18 and I submitted it thinking like this is going to be great. I'm going to submit this and they rejected me and I framed it. I still have it framed somewhere in this house. I was just so proud that I tried. Like, because I think seeing a tangible thing in your hands like that, even if it's a rejection, that puts you miles above all the people who just talk about it. There's so many people who just are like, I want to be a writer, and then that's all that ever comes of it. They just, oh, I want to be a writer. Oh, but life is getting in the way, or oh, my kids are this, or my job is this, and it's like I have a job, I have responsibilities. I have multiple like freelance gigs always like juggling and I still make the time to do what I'm passionate about. So don't take rejection as, well, my work sucks, nobody likes it. Either take it as maybe I need to rework this until it is, until someone can't resist it, or maybe this just isn't the place for it and keep trying again because eventually it's going to be like Cinderella's slipper and it's going to be the right fit for what somebody's putting together and they're going to love it and their audience is going to love it and it's not going to have been a waste. It's just going to take time to do that. So for the snafu ones, I wrote it, I shortened it to 7,000 words. I kept getting these long, long waits and rejections. And I was just like, this is such a weird piece, too, because it's Western horror, like it's a period piece, Western horror set in Wyoming, which is where I'm from originally. And I was just like, who's going to want this? Like, there's not a lot of calls for Western horror because it's just not a super popular thing. So every time one would come up, I was like, this is the time. This is it. This is when, and then I would get the almost so close. And eventually I was like, you know what? I believe in this story. And I liked how the story was when it was long. In fact, I think it could have been a little bit longer. And so I went back and I did a longer version where I was like, you know what? Let's add the scenes I wanted to add originally and let's flesh this out a little bit more. And as I went back in, I added a lot more. It's a creature feature too. So like
Cool.
went back into the monsters. I like beefed that whole part up and I was like, dang, I love this thing. Like I would read this. 100% would read this. So then I decided, you know what? I'm gonna self-publish this. And I was making I started making the artwork for it, and then I was like, you know what? Actually, let me slow my roll down and give publishers a chance first to pick it up. because I know novellas are pretty hot right now because a lot of people like me, you're busy and you
Yeah.
wanna read, but you can't always keep a carrying comfort size novel in your head while as you're like putting it down and picking it up. So sometimes a novella, you just need a win. You just need a quick win as a reader where you're like, I just read a book. And so they're positive, they boost you up. And with horror, like, they're great. It's the story is just as long as it needs to be, in my opinion. And so I was like, if the I have it as a backup plan to self-publish the second I get a no from the
Yeah.
publishers, like, it's ready to go. But if the publishers want it, then it's going to be seen by a lot more people, and it's going to get an additional built-in fan base other than what I've already built with my past novel and my short stories. So it behooves me to wait a little bit, calm down, and let them, give them a shot at it. So right now it is getting read by my favorite indie publisher, and they're considering it for their upcoming lineup. And if they say no, then it will be out very shortly on
Fantastic.
Amazon and my website.
And
But
how are you with self-publishing? Because I
I
know you
love it.
self-publish your first book, Mantis.
Yeah, so
And
I
how was
loved
that
it.
whole process?
Yeah, I had a really good experience with it. This is back when there weren't this is back in 2016, so you got to remember it's kind of a different sort of digital landscape than it is now. Like, wasn't just a quick Google search to like figure out how to do it. So it
Sure.
was a bit of a struggle for me initially getting the book up there and finding out how to get it into the formats that it needed. And like, I kept, like, with the digital, I think I went through like 7 different drafts where I kept having Amazon send me proof copies, and I was like, this looks terrible. And then I was back to the drawing board with formatting, and I was like, sent it again. I was like, okay, this looks better, but this part, the font is all wonky. And so keep going back and forth until I was really happy with it. But then once it was out, it was great. It was like a really great experience. I had a bunch of copies printed. I did like a local signing at my library, which made me feel like a god amongst men. It's just your local library, so nobody really cares. But like, it was awesome signing autographs on my own book. And we did like some live giveaway events on like Facebook Live and stuff like that, which was a lot of fun. And then it sold, a couple $100 worth of copies just through Amazon to people that weren't just my friends. So that was really cool. And like, it may not sound like much, like you can make $400 in a day doing certain jobs and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, I wrote that, and like, it can make money from now to eternity.
Sure. Yeah.
And like, sometimes there'll be like a resurgence. Like, I just discovered recently how to put it on Kindle Unlimited, and that spurred a bunch of sales because then a bunch of people started reading it. And then I found a book sprout, and then a bunch of people were adding new reviews of it and stuff like that in exchange for free copies. And like, the new reviews were making people like, okay, well, maybe I'll give this a shot. So it can be a really good thing. I do recommend that if you're going to do it, that you either have an editor go through it, or you have someone who's very skilled with grammar go through it, because sometimes the mistakes, you're only going to catch the mistakes that exist. Like, even if you went through it 100 times, you're going to be like, okay, this looks good to me. But if you've been spelling something wrong your whole life, or you've been saying something wrong, like, that's the worst. If you say phrases incorrectly, or you're
That's
using
for all intensive purposes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, my sister, that's the worst. When I edit a lot of her stuff, and what is that, homonyms? I think is it the homonyms
Yeah,
where
the sound
two
exactly the
words,
same. Yeah.
like taught and taught, like you taught someone, or something is pulled taut. And
Correct. Yeah.
like, it's
I've been guilty of that exact one.
really so, like, that's the thing with self-publishing, is it's a dead giveaway if that stuff isn't caught before you publish it. that you didn't have an editor, and a lot of people, I know I felt this way as a reader. A lot of people feel kind of cheated out of their money if there's too much of that. Like if there's one or two, no big deal. Like it's not detracting from the story.
Yeah.
But if it's like there was one that I read recently, I'm not gonna say the name of it because I feel bad even just saying this much about it, but it was something I was excited to read, and then I read it, and I was like, it was such a struggle to read even the second half to just try to finish it because it was just so littered with like bad dialogue and grammar mistakes and stuff like that. And I was just like, I got it on Kindle Unlimited, so it didn't cost me anything. But I was like, if I'd have paid for this, I'd literally be furious right
Yeah.
now because
Yeah.
I'd be like, this is like grade school stuff. Like nobody checked this over. Like I don't even think he read it and checked it over. He just was like, it's done. I'm publishing it, you know. So that's the one thing I would say you really got to be hyper vigilant about your editing and trying to get it in front of someone else, both for like grammar reasons and for plot holes. Like sometimes like we'll overlook our own plot holes and stuff.
Sure.
And like I'm editing my sister's book right now, and like it's been a struggle just because I'm like, okay, so why would they have done this? And then she's like, good, good
It's
point.
like because I felt like it.
Yeah, well, it's like as a reader, they're gonna ask that, and or you know what's worse is you're at a book signing, and or you know you're doing an interview and somebody asks that, and then now you look like an idiot because you don't have the answer for that because there is no answer for that. So we have the opportunity to fix this now before this goes out into the world. Like I'm the only one who saw this mess up, you know. So um, it's always good to get extra eyes on your work and stuff like that. But I do recommend self-publishing. Like it's fast. It's I've seen a lot of success with writers like Aaron Beauregard, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing their names right, but Aaron Beauregard is one of them that he self-publishes all of his novels. They're always like edited beautifully and like polished and ready to go and stuff like that. And like I would buy his stuff in a heartbeat. And I know that he has, you know, basically like built an empire on that and the merchandise and stuff like that. So it definitely can be done. He doesn't have to share his profits with a publisher. He doesn't have to be at the, you know, deal with like constraints that a publisher puts on or telling him, you know, we got to cut this part of the book or change this
Yeah.
character to this before we can
And
publish it.
John's kind of, sorry, Aaron, he's kind of branded himself sort of the extreme guy
Yeah,
as well. He's found a very strong niche to sort of settle in and try to dominate.
yeah. And a lot of times that's hard for people to publish too. Like there's only certain publishers that'll publish extreme or splatterpunk and stuff like that. But that's one of the genres that I love to read the most. So like that's I read a lot of self-published books in that genre because there's so few places that publish it. And a lot of them, you know, they're booked for their publishing through, you know, 2014 or 2024. So it's a long way out if you want to get a book out. And that's one thing I really love about Godless too. Godless.com is that's a really good site if you whether you do Amazon or not. If you're self-publishing, definitely check out godless.com. It's for ebooks. It's not for like physical media, but the prices are really good. They're usually better than Amazon, and the percentage that you get off your book is really good compared to like what you would get for a publisher, and you're getting in front of a ton more people. But if you write horror, and particularly if you write horror that's so extreme or vile or repulsive or you know what, all those good words that wouldn't be good with like a mainstream horror publisher, Godless is amazing. The only downfall with Godless is it's just like Amazon. Anyone can self-publish there. So there's been a few books where I'm like, I can't even read this. I don't. This is almost not even English because it's just so like you know just slapped together and like, yep, I'm ready to publish it. I'm already working on book 2. Um, but then there's been so many like Blue Jay and things like that that I've read off Godless that have just blown my mind. I'm like, wow, I'm glad that I saw this here, because this would have gotten buried on Amazon. And it's there's some of those books are just absolutely amazing. So that's definitely a good resource to have if you're thinking about writing horror, particularly.
Hmm.
Which, if you're thinking about writing Nightmare or taking the Nightmare Fuel class, like that is going to be your bread and butter. Like it's a great resource. It's also a great place to just get books. Like I think I spent $20 on there the other day, and I got like 40 books. It was crazy. It was
Fantastic.
crazy.
Recommend
Yeah.
everybody check out Godless then in that
Yeah,
case.
it's awesome. It's a really, really awesome site. The guy that owns it, the creator, Drew, he's super nice. He works with you like so well to get your book on there. Like it literally was like a less than 24-hour process from the time I emailed him saying I'd like to get Mantis on there to where it was live and people were buying it. So that was really exciting. So
And
yeah.
for your approach to horror, obviously if you're writing some extreme stuff, I guess you're also writing stuff that's not so extreme.
Yeah.
What kind of excites you about horror? Where do you kind of the worst question ever? Where do you get your ideas from? But where do these things fall into place for you when you get a spark of inspiration? What makes you think, oh, this one's going to be all splatter, and this one needs to be a bit more quiet?
Yeah.
How does
So
that work for you?
there's a couple of things. I do challenges for myself sometimes where like I'll read something that kind of inspires me, and I'm like, you know what? I want to write something like that. How would I be at that? So like, for example, cosmic horror. I've only read like a smattering of cosmic horror throughout my years. I'm usually more like extreme and splatterpunk or like mainstream horror. But I read a really good cosmic horror story, and then I saw a call for cosmic horror, and I was like, I want to try this. So sometimes I do it, and I love how that story turned out. So far, it hasn't found a home, but I still really love how it turned out. Like, it would be something I'd be proud to self publish one day if I had enough for a collection. But um, I think eventually it will find a home. But so sometimes it's good to just challenge yourself just to see like what your voice as a writer would be like in a certain style, like extreme or splatterpunk or mainstream, just regular mainstream horror or cosmic horror, any of the little niches. I did like one of those goop horror. There was a
Oh yeah,
call goop horror,
got a
which
body and
I
body
love.
melt.
Yeah, so I always love like the Blob and the stuff. And then I read Lore's book Inside Out, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. And a couple of her short stories, and I was like, I want to do something like that. And so I did, and that one is the one that just got published at Black Hare Press. It was my second try
Nice.
getting it published, and they were like, yeah, we want it. And I was like, awesome, that's so cool. So sometimes you'll surprise yourself at your ability to do something if you just step outside the box and say, you know what, I want to try this. And the other thing that I do is this, where I did this on a plane one day. I wrote. I'm not going to show this for a long time because I don't need anybody freeze framing it and like pranking me. But I I wrote a list of weird places that I've been to that would be cool to set a story in, like just all the weird places I can think of in my life where I'm like that one alley in New Orleans, or that the cruise ship to Cozumel, that kind of stuff. And then on the other list, it's things that freak me the f out, and it's literally a list of all the things in the world, imagined or real, that just freak me out. And like I try to go through that list before I'm starting a story to see if I can work any of those in. So like I'm gonna flash it real quick. That's what the list looks like. Um, but like for example, the top of the list, I'm gonna tell this because it's pertinent. At the top of the list is the first thing that just came to mind was mayflies. I was kayaking one day,
Nice.
and these mayfly, I didn't know what a mayfly was, and we got attacked by like attacked. We got swarmed by like a horde of them, and I thought they were gonna bite me, and like I didn't know what they were, and it was the scariest thing I one of the scariest things I've ever seen, just because I didn't know what was happening, and they eclipsed the sun. There were so many of them. It was such a thick cloud of them over us. All of the sudden, it came on like a freaking like not even like a hurricane. Just they came on like just sudden rain or something. It was just all they were in my hair, they were in my mouth. I'm screaming, they were getting in my mouth, and I grabbed one thinking it might bite me or something. I stuck it in my pocket because they left just as fast as they came. This whole thing happened in like 5 minutes, maybe 10. And I brought one back and to the cabin that we were staying at, and I renting a cabin with a bunch of my friends, and one of my friends, she's super into bugs. She's like, "Oh, that's mayfly," and she's like telling me the story of how mayflies work, and I was like, she's like, "Oh yeah, that's totally harmless. Like that might as well just be like a mosquito that doesn't bite, or like a grasshopper. It's just a grasshopper that flies, basically." And I was like, "This is one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. I didn't know what was happening." So I used that. I thought about that fear. So there was a call for I can talk about this one just because I it actually got picked up for publication. But there was a call in the Elemental horror series by Eerie River, which I love. If you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend it if you like horror. It started with Earth and then went to fire, and then water is getting ready to come out, and then air is the last one, and they are all anthology short stories that pertain to that topic. So like
Sure.
the first one's got like caves and gardens and all these. It's really really creepy. Like I could not get enough of it when I read it. It was the best, probably the best anthology I've ever read. And so I was like, they were still doing the call for air. So I was like, I gotta get in this one. I gotta get in this one. This is like my small goal that I'm setting. That's my everything. So I was like, what am I even gonna write? So I decided to work my mayfly experience, like the fear that I felt from this horde of mayflies, into a story that's set in the winter time. And instead of being like mayflies, they're like mayfly adjacent, but with like teeth that burrow.
Yeah.
Like basically, these things are what I thought was happening. Like it's everything I thought was happening that day on the water, but set in a snowstorm and really actually hurting people. And they got picked up first try. And they were like, she actually wrote me like a personal acceptance letter where she's like, "This is terrifying." Like this, we want this. We absolutely, like, she even announced it before, like, to me in an email. She's like, "We want this. Please keep this on the down low. But like, we're not announcing acceptances for like another month, but we don't want you to go anywhere else with the story. We love this."
That's
So like,
awesome.
I think that that's very important if you're trying to write horror, is to try to inject any of your own personal like fears or insecurities. Like I know it like opens you up to a lot, or exposes you, or sometimes people aren't as scared of things that as you are. Like someone else might look at a mayfly and be like, "It's a mayfly. Like this is nothing." Whereas I look at clowns and I'm like, they bring cheer and joy to children at birthday parties. Like, I don't see why these are so scary. I just don't understand that. So what's scary to you is not gonna be scary to someone else, but the fear that you feel in those moments, if you can find a way to capture that and display it on a page, you've got something. Like that's writer gold right there. So make a
Well,
list of your fears.
wonderful idea. I think we're going to end on that because that is such a great little piece of
Yay!
gold to walk away with for people to do that. Erica, where can people find you, if they want to look up more of your work?
So my website, I'm still building it right now, but it is up, and it's got links to a lot of the different anthologies that are coming out. That one's www.ericasummers.com, ERICA Summers.com. And then I'm also on Facebook, and I'm friends with like a ton of writers. So if you like any writers on there, it's gonna say mutual friend because I just like them all. Um, but yeah, you can hit me up on Facebook and see updates there. I'm starting to learn Instagram and TikTok so that I can start trying to promote my stuff. Because before I'm just like, Facebook is all the social media that I need, and now I'm realizing the landscape is changing, and I need to change with it as well and try to attack social media from all angles if I'm gonna make this a career. So
Sure.
look for me on those soon, but definitely ericasommers.com is a good place. And then check out any of my movies. My last two are on a bunch of different streaming services. One's called Obsidian by Erica Summers, and the one prior to that is called Mr. White, and Mr. is spelled out Mister. Both monster movies. That's kind of my thing. I'm also working on a novelization of Obsidian to release it as a book. Now that I have all these new tools from Nightmare Fuel and stuff, I think that for people who books are more their thing, or people who really like the movie, or just didn't get a chance to see the movie because it was out during the pandemic and nobody saw the dang thing, I think it's a great way to like kind of get attention one for the other. People who like the movie, now you can check out the book. If you like the book, hey, check out the movie too. It's already out.
Perfect. Yeah.
And, kind of cross promote that way. So
Superb. Well, now that I have a list as well, I'll be off after this to buy a few copies of everything. So,
awesome. I can send you some too.
again, thank you so much, Erica. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And
Thank you.
I'll do
Thank
a little
you.
thing here for everybody watching as well and point at the camera. So if you would like to add some extra impact to your horror storytelling as well, do check out the Nightmare Fuel course at autocrit.com/nightmare. We'll have the link in the description of this video on YouTube, along with we'll pop a link into your website there, Erica, as well. So everybody can pop over there, pick up some great stuff, and get reading and enjoy, and hopefully get writing, get inspired.
And
Thank
get
you
the
all.
software too. Yeah, get the
And
software too.
become a member as well. Yes, of course. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time, and goodbye.